Welcome to the daily brief for carbon removals at COP28. We'll be sitting down every day of the conference with a different carbon removal expert to talk about their perspectives on carbon removal and COP and everything going on here on the ground. So today I'm here with Phil DeLuna of Deep Sky. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
So why don't we start off with just a quick, bio background on yourself and how you came to carbon removal.
Sure. So I'm a scientist by training. I have a PhD in material science and engineering from the University of Toronto, where I'm also currently an adjunct professor. My PhD research at the time was focused on CO2 conversion, particularly electrochemical CO2 conversion into fuels and chemicals. From that, we launched a company and started and competed in the first Carbon X Prize, which was a $20 million competition to capture and convert the most CO2 into useful product. I scaled up a reactor from a small Rubik's Cube-sized box to a shipping container that we deployed on a natural gas combined cycle power plant in Alberta. Made to the final round, didn't win. And then the National Research Council of Canada, which is the government of Canada's national lab system, recruited me to become a director for their national lab. And I built a national lab in Toronto focused on CO2 conversion, clean hydrogen production, and artificial intelligence for materials discovery. Did that for 3 years, then got really frustrated by the face of government, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
So then I left, joined the private sector, joined the dark side. I was a consultant with McKinsey, led their carbon tech work and sustainability for Canada. Did that for 18 months before leaving and deciding I wanted to be a doer again and I wanted more ownership. So I joined Deep Sky 5 months ago.
Okay, cool. And I mean, a lot of that kind of relates to carbon removal, but how did you decide carbon removal specifically was the thing where you wanted to make an impact?
Yeah. I mean, ever since I was a kid, I've always been intensely curious. And for me, science was a way of being able to uncover and understand our world. And then as I continued down my scientific and academic career, I realized how all of these advancements and creations that have led to industrialization and our quality of life are also impacting our climate. So if you're an innate problem solver, you want to solve big problems, climate change is the biggest problem to solve. At first, I tackled that through, well, can we replace the fossil-based products that we have today with products that we make from CO2 in the air? But then as you walk down that path, you realize that it's very incumbent. You are a feedstock into a larger supply chain. It's going to take a long time to do that. It's actually a lot harder to change something that already exists because of inertia versus building something completely new. And I've always learned about carbon removal since the beginning of my academic studies. I started really diving into it when I was at the NRC, and then decided to go all in because I truly believe that we're at the beginning of a multi-trillion-dollar market. This is like the oil and gas industry at the turn of the last century. People just don't know it yet. So, if you're going to be doing anything in life, why not try to make a market that also saves the planet and is at the start of it?
Absolutely. And so, tell us about what you're doing at Deep Sky and how that's kind of helping to move that change forward.
Sure. So Deep Sky, we are a technology agnostic project developer and owner operator of CDR infrastructure. We focus entirely on the hardest CDR, tech-based direct air capture and direct ocean capture technologies. Our thesis as a company is we looked at the market and we saw that there are all these amazing tech companies that were developing new reactors or new ways to capture CO2 from the air. And they kept hitting the same problems, the same wall. That wall was access to renewables and access to storage. And if you look at other clean tech verticals, whether it's solar or wind, you have project developers and then you have technology developers. Panasonic builds solar cells. They're not building the solar projects in Canada. So why should that be any different for carbon? That gap in the market, we think, is something that we're trying to address in a unique way by being technology agnostic. So we are off to the races. We just closed a $75 million Series A. And our co-founders, Fred Lalonde and Joost Overkerk, are co-founders of a company called Hopper, which is a $5 billion tech company in Canada. They started Deep Sky with the intent to look at reversing climate change because they were looking into it at Hopper. They started offsetting their emissions with trees. They planted a bunch of trees, but then they quickly realized two things. One, climate change is happening far faster than we predicted, and the IPCC models are likely conservative rather than realistic, especially since they don't map or project tipping points. And two, that planting trees simply is not enough. And so that's why they founded Deep Sky. So that $75 million is going to fund our first two projects, or the start of our first project, and then the planning of our second. Our first project is we're calling Deep Sky Alpha, which is going to be a testing and validation center And the idea is the technology space is so fragmented. There are so many new companies, and the innovation learning curve is like this right now, that it doesn't make sense for a project developer to just pick one company and hope that it's the one that wins. So rather than doing that, we're going to try them all. We're building a testing and validation center where if you're a technology company that is developing a pilot anywhere from 50 tons per year to up to 1,000 tons per year, we want to bring you to Canada. We want to test you in our hottest day of the summer and our coldest day of the winter and compare and understand if it makes sense for you to scale in Canada. And the best technologies that make it through alpha, we are going to scale up and grab the industry by its collar and help with deployment of Deep Sky 1, which will be our first commercial facility. Deep Sky Alpha will have a capacity of around 3 to 3,500 tons per year. Deep Sky 1 will have a capacity of 300,000 tons per year. Deep Sky Alpha has 12 potential companies and pads, we're calling them, and that's for air. We're also doing ocean at the same time, and Deep Sky Alpha Ocean will have 5 pads. So we've announced partnerships already on the ocean side with Aquatic and with Captura. On the air side, we've announced partnerships with Mission Zero, who's going to come to Alpha, and we announced a partnership with Climeworks and MOU, and that's they're too big for Alpha, so we're looking at our first commercial facility or one of our commercial facilities with them, and we're off to the races trying to scale this technology as quickly as possible.
Cool. And yeah, so tell me about the role you guys play versus some of the partners you work with. What's your role? How do you support them?
Yeah. So think of us as the kind of the Intel Inside model, right? So we are building the plants where we own in the transportation and storage infrastructure. We do all the permitting. We own and operate the plant. We do all of that. We're Microsoft building the computer, and then Capture partners are Intel building the microchip. They build the core tech. They build the reactor technology. They slot that reactor technology into our plants, and then we scale that together. And our business model is very flexible with many of them. It can be a joint venture. It could be a license and royalty agreement. It could be a manufacturing vendor supply agreement. It depends on what the company, how they're structured, what their board wants to do, what their manufacturing capability is, how sensitive they are to IP, all of these sorts of things. And I should mention that, we are a partnership and collaboration first company. We're not trying to hog the puck, to, use a Canadian expression. And in fact, we are encouraging all of our partners to product develop on their own or to help them grow. And we ask for no exclusivity. We ask for no IP. We just want to scale.
Yeah. Amazing. And how do you think about picking the right partners, making sure they're high quality, they can deliver, all of that kind of stuff?
It's a great question. So this is a question I get asked all the time. There are kind of different selection criteria. The first selection criteria is that it needs to be electrified. And the reason for that being is we've looked at other technologies that need high temperature process heat, and oftentimes that means they have to actually be co-located next to an industrial facility. That limits our ability to deploy. So if it uses heat, and some of our partners do, at least can it be electrified heat? So the number one thing is, can it be electrified? Second is there a pathway to low energy intensity per ton of CO2? We're targeting, if they don't have it today, if they could at least potentially demonstrate 1,000 kilowatt hours per ton of CO2 as their scaled up nth of a kind spec, then we're really interested. Because ultimately, electricity is going to be the bottleneck for all these technologies, and green electrons are becoming more and more competitive. When everyone is driving a Tesla and using heat pumps to heat their home in a few years, those electrons will be even more competitive for DAC or DOC. So that's the second thing. The third thing is do one thing really well, and that's capture CO2. We've met some technologies that produce acid or produce a bunch of byproducts, and that creates complexity on what do we do with that byproduct? How do we get it to market? Do we get it to market? Do we have to decontaminate it? What's our offtake strategy for that? So we're looking at technologies that ideally just capture carbon really, really well. And then finally, frankly, and this is the venture capital hat being put on, but do we have confidence in the team? Do we think that they can scale the tech, that there's a manufacturing aspect to it? Oftentimes, our CEO, Damien, the first thing that he does is he'll go to a company and ask, okay, we've made this purchase agreement for 1 ton per year, or 1 system. What are you going to do? What's your manufacturing strategy for when we come back to you and order 300? And many of these companies haven't even thought about it. So that's also really telling.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the scalability is something that every company needs to look at, and it's hard to even wrap your head around in the world of CDR as it stands when, it's delivering at such small scales at the moment. I wanted to ask about Canada as well, and I think I'm kind of asking everyone this because people are coming from different countries. There's different natural resources, like you mentioned, storage potential, all of that. Like, where do you think are the unique benefits or advantages to Canada and CDR?
So I actually think that Canada will be a global superpower in CDR, and it has all the intrinsics to allow for the lowest levelized cost of capture in the world. And I'll tell you why. Like, number one is access to renewables. In places like Quebec, where 98% of the grid is renewable and you can just plug into the grid because it's all hydroelectricity, that's a huge advantage. The second is we have enough storage capacity in Canada to completely reverse climate change, to store every single ton that humanity has ever emitted since the Industrial Revolution. And all of that capacity exists in Alberta and Saskatchewan and Manitoba in the west of Canada. There is a ridiculous amount of storage capacity available. We also have extremely attractive policies and incentives. For example, there's the Carbon Capture Utilization and Storage Investment Tax Credit, CCUS ITC. It's kind of Canada's response to the U.S. Inflation Reduction Act and the 45Q reduction tax credit. The only difference is it's a 60% reduction on CapEx. And so that's money up front today rather than money that you have to actually raise capital investment financing in order to get your pilot up, and then you get money back after every ton captured, which is what happens in the States. Finally, we have a workforce and labor that is highly skilled, highly technical, and knows how to move fluids and gases and heat. That's the existing oil and gas sector. So one of the things we're really excited about Canada is a lot of the places we're looking to deploy are communities that were industrial communities, mining communities, oil and gas towns, etc., heavy emission communities that actually have all the skills to scale this industry. And it's an opportunity for a clean energy destination for these people to transition to.
Sure.
So for all those reasons and more, I think Canada is a great place to be.
Amazing. And since we're here at COP, are you optimistic about the COP process this year? Pessimistic? Kind of mixed views? How are you feeling about this?
It's interesting, right? Like there's been a lot has been said about COP, about how we're in, an oil and gas producing country, how there are tons of companies and private sector that are here. I mean, ultimately, we have to recognize that this is the only forum we have globally dedicated to these discussions and these negotiations. And so, regardless of what happens around COP, what would the alternative be? We need this. We need to have COP. So overall, I've been really impressed, really happy with the interactions that I've had here, the conversations I've been able to have, like with you and with others. Overall, ultimately, humanity will judge us, history will judge us on what we accomplish here. And not only what we accomplish at COP in terms of government policy, but what we accomplish at COP in terms of private sector investment and actual project delivery and development. And we need to do it all. So it's the biggest COP ever, and I don't think that's about that.
Amazing. Well, before we go, is there anything cool that you want to shout out, panels that you know of, things you're speaking at, anything that you think people should know about?
Yeah, well, I mean, I would say I am in an extremely privileged position to be able to be here and to benefit from conversations with so many people. Honestly, as much as possible, if you can try to find any of these resources online, shout out to Carbon Removals at COP, right? I mean, amazing job. One of the funny things, and we were talking about this before this interview, but it's actually very difficult to find an agenda or list of events. And the service that, Carbon Removals at COP has done in helping my life become easier while I navigate this maze that is COP28 has been really great. So I think I'll leave my shout out to that.
I'll take it. Thanks so much. Cool. Thanks so much for joining us, Phil. To everyone watching, thanks for being here and joining us for the Daily Brief. Do come back tomorrow for the next one. And as Bill said, check out all the other great stuff at carbonremovals.org.